Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you're all well and happy. Had a good little break for a week. Wasn't much of a break for me, but anyway, had lots to do, had lots to catch up on. So welcome everybody, and we'll start with a new project today. But first, before we start, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what happened to the little cabinet. Now, it's not bad, but this is what it ended up looking like. I put a coat of finish on it, and just to show you what it looked like when it was finished. So that's the little cabinet. So it came up quite nice. It's very pretty. The door opens really nice. You haven't put handles or on the drawer or the door, or I haven't put a latch on it yet, which is going to happen soon. So just want to go over a couple of things. The cabinet itself is quite thin. Somebody rang me and said, why didn't you make the door solid so that you could hang things on the inside of the door? It's not that sort of cabinet. The cabinet is actually designed so that, as you can see, it's quite narrow. And it's basically designed to put things in, open door, get stuff out. And if you have stuff that fits onto the door, what you have to do is you have to deal with heavyweight hinges, because get quite a bit of weight on there and the door sags and so forth. So the idea is to be able to see what you're getting into, and it's only a thin cabinet. So we kept it at fairly small. So the things that we dealt with in this this cabinet were, first of all, the dovetails. And people said to me, "Oh, blind dovetails, beauty." Well, yes and no. They're actually, the cabinet itself is a fairly round, square object, but I've added a bottom on it, and I've added the top on it as well. On the back of it, you can see I've fitted, and this is another point that somebody brought up with me the other day, I call these French hooks because you hook them onto the door. So there's one here and there's one down the bottom. But their proper name is called a French cleat. So I've been informed. Well, I already knew that. I just Aussieized the term. We've got this lovely back on it, and you can see the colour in the back is quite nice, which also shows up in the front of the cabinet. And we've got, like I say, dovetails all over the place. You've got the dovetails in the front, the side of the box in here. You've got the butterflies in the doors. Okay, so there and here. When we open the cupboard and take out the drawer, you'll see we have our dovetails on that sliding dovetail shelf, and then we have what we consider to be blind dovetails and on the drawer itself. So basically a nice little dovetailed box. Strong box, because it's the dovetails will actually hold it all together. The top and the bottom are just screwed in place, as is the French cleat. So, and then a coat of finish on there like so. Okay, so that's what it looks like. It needs another coat of finish, and we'll get that sorted later. So let's put this aside. And now I'll get on with what we're going to start with today. Now, a couple of weeks ago, what I said to you was, I gave you a little teaser actually of a couple of little cabinets. Now, for those of you who didn't hear what the story was, we were invited to the Tassie Boat Show in Tasmania, biggest wooden boat show in the Southern Hemisphere, so I'm told. So what that person said to us was, can you make something small that will fit in a boat? Okay, so I put my thinking cap on, and I came up with a little cabinet. Now, thinking about the cabinet, I thought, well, the little cabinet that I just showed you would be ideal for a boat because it's quite small, but like I say, it's not very deep, so you wouldn't get much in it anyway. So what I wanted to do was just to keep the box making gear using the Gifkins jig and create something out of what we already have, and that is the special jewellery box. Now this box is 300 by 200, and it's just basically the special jewellery box, like so. So it's quite a nice little box. Now if I take all the bits out of it and then stand it up on its end, and this is how I came up with the other cabinet. So it becomes a cabinet. Just thought that would be the way to work it. The things that we have on here though, we've got the feet that fit, we've got an inserted a base in it, we've cut dovetails in half to create that, so it's taken a lot of, there's a fair bit of work involved in getting it to this stage where I wanted to simplify it, make it a little bit smaller or a little bit easier for people to make, but using the same techniques that we use to make the box. And so I came up with this, and this was the teaser that I came up with the other day. So it's just a little box, and as you can see, the dovetails, it's just the same as the side of our little box, but instead of cutting through the hinge, through here for hinging, all I've done is I've added the back onto it. Okay, I've added a top and a bottom, and then in the front I've added a door. Okay, again highlighting butterflies. And then I thought, well, before I put the shelf in there, I thought, well, you know, what's it going to have in it? How are you going to, what am I going to do on the inside of the box? So what I've done here is, because I've fitted the door in, if you have a look, you can see I've recessed the shelf into here. Now, all of these things that I'm showing you today, you can put together and design your own little box. So there we have that little box. The thing about it is, it was it was quite a nice little box for what we were doing, but yeah, we thought, well, we can upscale that a little bit, and instead of having a little cupboard, we'll have a little set of drawers. And so I put together this one. Now it's exactly the same. You can see it's got the little box, it's got a top and a bottom, it's got the back added, but instead of this time, what I've done here is I've got 4 drawers. Now each of the drawers is the same size, so they're all exactly the same size, and I've had to put in a the mounts for the drawer. But what I did here was I've just got what people would call a dado, or just a trench, just a square trench, and slid those in. So rebating those is fairly simple, fairly easy with a router bit, and all I've done is measured it up and done it all exactly the same. So this is probably a good place to start for a lot of people, is to start with even drawers. Now I've got 4 drawers in this one here. That wasn't good enough for what I was thinking, so I upscaled it, and I upscaled it to this one. Now this one, it's made of cedar, was the one that I was going to do at the show. So I cut a whole lot of material and did all sorts of things, and then COVID struck and then we couldn't go, so we didn't go, and we haven't been anyway. So this has got exactly the same techniques as those other 2 boxes, or the 3 boxes, where we've got the dovetails showing here and here. Just put this on so you can see them. So the dovetails are showing there and there, but that's it. We've limited it to just being able to see the dovetails there. We've added the back on it, right? And this one has 5 drawers. The difference between this one and the 4-drawer version is that the drawers on this one are all different sizes. There's 5mm variation between this and the 4th drawer, and then quite a big drop for the drawer below. And as you can see, I've got bits and pieces in these here. I'll just take a couple of those out. You can see there's in the drawers themselves, I've got little partitioning and all that sort of stuff. But the other thing, when you look up here, is this is where I've shown up the dovetails. So I've got sliding dovetails in here rather than square cut. And you can see as we go down. That set up another problem. Now the problem was that how do you get it even layout and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to go through all of that, but this is the version that we're going to make. You can see I've got silver ash, so a different colour on the box. So when you do open the box, you can see a variation in colour, particularly when you open it up, and you can also see that they're all got what essentially are blind dovetails showing on the end of each of the cabinet, each of the drawers. Okay, so 2 dovetails all the way down here till we get to 3, and when we get to the bottom drawer, you open the bottom drawer, which is quite deep. It actually has a sliding dovetailed tray in it. So it has a little bit more work to it. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of work involved in getting this to a finish. The other thing that you may have noticed is that the material that I've used for the drawer is very thin. It's only 7mm. So the idea is to keep it very light and bright, and just work on having something reasonably delicate. Now the last feature that you've got on here is all of the knobs on here are all hand turned. Okay, so I've turned all those out of a little bit of Mikasa ebony. So I got a little bit of ebony there, just turned it up, made it look a little bit nice. And there will be, when we look at it, there will be, when we do a little bit of turning on the lathe, I'll turn a couple of them. But what I'll do is also show you a couple of different designs that are involved in those sorts of things like that. The other thing that I don't like about this particular box, even though I like the box, is the fact that you can see the back panel on the edge here, and I don't want to do that. So we're going to recess that into the back before we put it together, so that it sits flush at the back, and all you can see is the timber from here to here, rather than here to here and then the back panel. So that's going to be another feature that we do. Okay, so that's what we're up for. So hopefully you guys will get something out of it. If you want to work along with me, then I, by all means, do so, and we'll get quite a bit done. So just a little bit of drink, and then we'll get on with building our box, or building the cabinet. Okay, shift that. Okay, now what I have here is I've got 3 different timbers, and I'm going to talk about what happens when the router bit's actually cut into some of these timbers, because you'll find that even if you are doing making small boxes and things like that, you're going to find the vagaries of timber tend to work differently, whether it's softwood or hardwoods and so forth. So some of the easier things to deal with are, you know, sometimes a little complicated to get your head around. So let's go through some of those. Now, what I have here is I have some rose mahogany. These 2 are cedar, and this one here is coachwood. I was also going to put together a silver ash one, but I don't have enough silver ash. It's too hard to find. So I have to stick with what I've got here. Now, all of these timbers are different. This is a softwood, and they're a bit furry. So for those of you in the US, this is Western red cedar, and this is Australian coachwood. So you can see that, this rose mahogany, people call it rosewood. I like to use the right term for it, rose mahogany. So as you can see, quite pretty. So I've dressed all these up, and the other thing you might notice is that they're all different sizes. So this one here's, if you look at this one here's the narrowest one, and then we've got two here about the same size. And I'm not too concerned about the sizes. The size of the box, the width of the timber, I had a tape here somewhere. The width of the timber will be dependent on how deep you want the box to be. And this is where you can sort of fudge it a little bit and fiddle around with it. So on here, this one here is 68 millimeters. This one here's 42 millimeters. This one's 45 millimeters. And this one down here is 34 millimeters. Now all of those measurements are based around what happens with the jig. So when we sit this on the jig, if we sit that up here, you can see how many dovetails I'm going to have on this piece of timber. But what I've done is I've lined it up so that I've got full ones all the way along, not half ones. The reason for that is that once you cut a half dovetail there, you're going to find that putting the back in it is going to have an effect on that dovetail joint, and also working on the front of it may have a little bit of an effect on it. So if we sit that like so that we have, just come right in on that, you can see there that I'm fairly well onto the pin of the jig. That's going to give me a lot more support on the edge of the piece of timber. I may end up having to clean it off if I have a little bit of tear out happening when we cut our sliding dovetails. So thinking about that, now this one here's our A10, cuts material between 13 and 22, which is, sorry, 5 and 13. This here is just over 11 and a half. This one here, as I said before, it's a different size, and you can see I have the same result, just one less dovetail. Okay, so you can limit the amount of dovetails or the number of dovetails that you want to do. This one here, this one, again, I can limit the number of dovetails, so it's another half a dovetail on that one. And this one here actually doesn't fit on here. So I may need to trim a bit off if I wanted to do it this way, or I can trim a bit off and give myself a half a dovetail, which I don't want to do. But the beauty about this is my H10. What we're going to do now, I'll show you what happens when we get our jumbo A. Same size router bits, same size dovetails, only the spread of the dovetails is a little different. So we can start thinking about changing up to different widths, different dimensions, different sizes, and different spread of joints over a large area. So when we look at this one, you can see it fits perfectly on here, and I've got a wider distance between each of my dovetails. Okay, so the dovetails are going to be here. That'll spread the dovetails out a little bit, which is another way of giving you a different visual effect of what happens with your dovetails on the box. When you look at the box itself, you can see the difference in the spread across the top and the bottom because they're visual all of the time. So thinking about what you do, you've got to start thinking ahead and start thinking about what's going to happen and things are going to look like. So therefore, what we need to do is start doing things like testing and test your different sizes. Always a very good idea. You can see I've already done the dovetails on this one here. I've got it all sorted, cut nicely so that it's got my different distances throughout the box. So I'll use this one here to cut the dovetails on here. Now I want to cut the sliding dovetails first. Okay, so we do all that work and then we'll cut the dovetails from the top and the bottom. Okay, so let's just shift this out of the way. Now, cutting the sliding dovetails, there's lots of different techniques. If you go back to Woodsmith issue 159, Chris Clark wrote an article on cutting sliding dovetails, or I think he wrote it, I'm pretty sure he wrote it, on sliding dovetails freehand. So if you go back to Woodsmith issue 159, you can see how Chris has actually done his dovetails with a freehand router, right? We're going to use the table. So, and we're also going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to sort of use some of the information that Chris has done, put on his show, but we'll do it a little differently. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one box and show you what happens to the timber as we're working it. So let's get started on that. Now, what I have here is this is the start of the box. All my pieces of material are all 11.5, nearly 12 mil. So we were in the range for the A10. And they've all been cut and sanded nicely. So I've got some relatively nice clean cedar. So there's the top and the two bottoms. So it's going to look like this. Top and the bottom. When you're cutting this material, just make sure that your the timber that you can see, it's going to be quite a large quite a deep box. I may need to trim some off later, but we'll see how we go. But the first thing is to cut the dovetails. Just make sure that when you're selecting your material, make sure that the frame of the material, just come in here, is, just get a pencil, quarter sawn. Now, quarter sawn timber won't show you very much pattern on the timber itself. You can see it's all just nice straight lines. The easiest way for those who have not done this before, you can see these lines here on the timber, and they cut almost across the piece of timber. They're pretty straight actually. That's generally what we classify as quarter sawn timber, showing that feature. Having that feature on your piece of timber means that you're going to get less warping and twisting of the timber when you get humidity changes. So you don't want the humidity actually affecting your box. Once you've got the frame done, cut your dovetails, cut your sliding dovetails, and then it all doesn't fit together because it's twisted because of humidity changes. And at the moment here in Coffs Harbour, it's quite warm, but it's been very, very wet over the last few weeks, few months. So humidity is quite high. So that's going to affect every bit of timber. So I've had to sort of search through my pile and see if I could find some timber that's actually much better than just ordinary old live sawn material. Now, where do we cut the sliding dovetails? The best thing to do is cut yourself a strip off the edge of it, if you can, and build yourself a little storybook or a story stick. This is what we call a story stick. When you look at it, what I've done is I've cut dovetails in the end, so I know exactly how far my dovetails are going to come down. And then I've cut little rebates, giving me the measurements right along the stick. Okay, so that's going to be a 35mm gap, 40, 45, 50, and I've got 70mm at the bottom, right? I've put the measurements on the side of the stick. Okay, so you can just see it's 300 by 12. So that's given me the information about the piece of timber as well. And then on the other side, I think it's this way up, you can see that I have all my measurements all laid out. Now these are the distances from the fence to the inside edge of the router bit. Okay, so I've got what we call a story stick. Now from my story stick, what I did was I built a tester. Now, same size stick, laid out exactly the same way. And then I cut myself some test dovetails. You can see the dovetails showing up here. Doesn't matter if you've got a little bit of tear out and that in it, but it's the fact is that it's a little sliding dovetail. So when we pull those out, this one's a bit tight. There's my dovetails, and they actually line up with, or pretty much line up with, my piece of timber there. Okay, so doing the little testing bit, and that includes cutting these little dovetails, is quite important, particularly if you haven't done it before or you haven't done it for a while. Do yourself a little story stick and cut yourself a little tester. That's going to minimise, this one here is a bit tight, that's going to minimise any errors that, that might pop up as you're doing things. It also might give you a sort of a lead into a particular technique that you want to enhance somehow, or you want to change, or you want to get better at, whatever. So at least you've got information from where you started from. So a tester and a story stick. Okay, so two good ideas that you can use during your processing. So now let's get started. So the first thing I need to do is cut my dovetails. So again, and this is, I reiterate this every single time that we use the dovetails, and that is scrub your router bit before you start for the day. Get it nice and clean from your last processing. A little bit of oil. And this oil from Japanese Tools is just brilliant. And I only put a little drop in there. Give it a little twist. Just make sure there's no burrs in there, or it's not. And remember, we're cutting dovetails. So these are our first step. It's our set of dovetails. Michael, I see that you're asking questions about the finish on my boxes there. The finish that I've used on that was, I started with a coat of organ oil. I did that first, and then I let that settle, and I was going to wax over the top of it, but then I thought I'll just let it go a little bit, and I wet sanded with this finish. So I wet sanded with the Kunos countertop oil. So did that over the whole box, and once that settled, wiped off the excess. And when I say wet sanded, I used 2000 grit sandpaper and wet hand sand it using this as a lubricant, and then follow that up with a coat of Pete's polish. This is the one that I use on pretty much all of mine. It's a beeswax polish. It comes up quite nice, and then I'll go over it. I'll go over that a couple of times in 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll give it a hard polish with a little buff. So basically, that's how I get them finished. Make it look quite nice. Dr. George Alstein. Good morning. All right, so first of all I need to set my height. Now the height, getting back to where we were, the height will depend on how deep you want your dovetails or how deep you want your trench. Okay, so I've gone about halfway. You don't have to go halfway, you can go a third of the way if you like. Often you'll find when you're working with 19mm material, you have 2/3 or 1/3 deep and 2/3. So you can make it up as you go along. Sometimes you'll find that if you take too much off here, that will cause the timber to buckle. And so you've got to be careful of that, particularly when you're using very, very light timbers. The harder timbers, not so much, but the lighter timbers, particularly this Western Red, it does move around a little bit. So halfway, and the way I set my halfway is, instead of measuring it, it's a little difficult because we don't have to be pedantic about how deep we are. We're going about halfway. So all I do is set my finger gauge like so. So slide my finger along my pencil. So I hold the pencil between two fingers like that, and then I slide my other finger along like so, and that will give me a gauge to where we stop at the thing, and I just put a little mark. So if you put a mark on like that, and then we turn the board around, holding that position, and put a second mark on there, you can see I'm pretty much in the middle, right? And so that's close enough. All right. Set my height. So I'm just going to set the height here. You want to come in on that? So there's my height. The dovetail bit that I'm using there is my A10 dovetail bit, okay, the TGA-D. So it looks like that. If you don't like doing that, I'm sticking to the same router bit all the time. You can buy from Carby Tool a number of different sized router bits that have different angles on them. This is 8 degrees. If you want something that's got a sharper angle on it, so it gives you a sharper dovetail, by all means go along to Carby Tool and you can pick up something there that will, not Carbotech, or Carbotech may have one, but generally my router bits are made at Carby Tool. Okay, fence. So this version here, like I said to you earlier, Sliding Dovetails by Chris Smith, issue 159 of Woodsmith. You can have a look at his version of that and just have a look and see how he does it with little fence that sits on top of the piece of timber. And generally you would do that if you were doing a large panel where you've got a long way to go. Now these are only small, right? And only doing small dovetails, so that's all I need to do is just to have this set up like this. I'm going to turn the table around a little bit so that Pammy can see what I'm doing with the camera. She can show you. So I'm just turning my table around like that. The beauty of our table is you can turn it and move it any way, and I'm still in front of you. So when we're measuring this, we go back to our storybook. And what I want to do is just to make sure that I've got my measurements exactly the same as my story stick. So I can use the story stick and just sit it on there like so, but that's not accurate enough for me, right? There's too much variation because I'm not sitting right on top of that. So the best thing to do is get yourself a ruler. Have a look at the measurement on the side of the story stick, right? So this one says 80 millimeters. So when I measure this, I make sure that the ruler is passing to the widest point on the top of the router bit. Now the widest point is between the 2 points. So the ruler must go right through both of those points, square to the fence. And that's 80 millimeters right there. And I'll lock that down. Just give myself a clamp here. Now, the router bit will spin in this direction. What that will do will push the piece of timber up against the fence. That's what you want it to do. You want it to push it. Don't come back the other way because it's going to kick it away from the fence and that's going to cause a bit of grief. So the idea is keep it so that it's pushing there. So that what I'm going to do is I'm going to push through that way. Now, it's pretty hard to push that through there and get it out the other side without it doing this on the fence. And we don't want that to happen on the fence. So the idea is put a push block behind it. And I built myself a push block. And this is my push block. It's just a piece of MDF. I've got some measurements on it. You can see it's telling me this is important, that it must be 90 degrees. I've just put a little handle on it. Given me directions there just in case I have a brain fade and forget which way I'm pushing things. So basically it's designed so that it will push up against the timber. Now I can't lock, get this over here so we can see what's going on. I can't put a lock or anything that will hold it down on this particular type of jig. So we can hold it with our fingers and we'll still get a reasonable result. So what we're going to do is just making sure that we've got that hard up against our fence, hard up against here, and we can just push the whole thing straight through. We're going to end up cutting into the bottom of here. That doesn't matter, it's just a piece of MDF and I can transfer this handle to another piece if I have to make a new one. But all of our measurements are going to be exactly the same size and we need to do both pieces at the same time. So, our first task, which is the outside of the box? Which is the prettiest piece of timber and what do you want to see on the outside of the box? Because we're going to cut the inside of the box. So I think we might do that as the two outsides. So when they go together, I've got close grain here, a little bit further apart there. And the same applies on that side of the box there. Well, actually it's that way up. There's my two pieces of timber. All right. The important thing with this timber, make sure you have square timber and it's dressed. I like to dress the inside of it. So I'm going to mark the outside of my box. So if that's the top of the box, I think I might mark, this is the front, so that's the back of the box, or the bottom of the box, and the same applies here. Just give myself a marking, and then when I cut those, I'm just going to make sure that my push fence, my push block is against the back edge of the box on the first couple of cuts. We're going to turn it around afterwards, but we'll have to do this one first. So that goes on there, hard up against the fence here, put my push block on there, and then all I'm going to do is push that straight through, making sure that I'm hard up against here. Now, having the push block here is going to minimize any blowout that you might, or tear out that might occur on the back edge of the box. So that's quite important. Okay, so ears on, we'll do a few cuts, or do a cut. Make sure everything's tight. And you can see here now that I've cut into my backing board, my piece here. It's irrelevant, really. It doesn't matter because it's only a piece of MDF. But the important thing is that we've cut ourselves a lovely dovetail. I'll just clean the sawdust out of there. Now here's what I was talking about when I said earlier about what happens to lighter timber. You can see it on the edge here. We've got all this furry stuff. That happens a little bit. So all I do is just get a little bit of sandpaper and just clean off the furry stuff. So that may eventually end up interfering with the fit of your dovetail, so you need to get rid of it anyway. Okay, so that's the first cut, and when you look at it you can see this nice cute little dovetail. A bit of fur stuff on the edge of that. So it shows up there, right? And then we turn it over and you've got exactly the same. This was the back of the box and this is where it cut into the push block. And you can see I've got a nice clean finish on the back. I haven't got any blowout or anything like that happening. The important thing, just make sure you clean through there. Right, second one. So my board's going to be like this. Oop. Right, so that's the back, the bottom, back. So that one goes there. And we do our second cut. What I might do here is just with the pencil, I might just mark the centre of my route a bit so that when I'm past that I don't go too far into the push block. Okay, second cut, ears on folks. Had a piece of sandpaper here somewhere. Let's go and walk a bit. Do another bit. Probably fell on the floor. There it is. So, when we put the two pieces together, the dovetails actually line up. You can see that they line up quite nicely. And so when I put the sleeve in there or the shelf in there, it's going to line up. Now, this is my piece of sandpaper. This only applies. You can see what I've done here is I've cut through. I've cut all the way through from one side to the other, right? So the dovetails are going to show all the way through. When I rebake the back of the box to fit the back into there, I'm going to have to go deeper than my dovetail cuts. That way we'll hide the dovetails and we won't see them at the back of the box. We will see them at the front because that's what we wanted to do. If I was trying to do something where I had a door that fitted inside the cabinet, I would have to stop a few millimeters short. So what that would mean with here is that I need to push all the way through to a stopping point, and I would probably put a stop here or a block on the end of that to give me a stopping point, but I would have to slide it all the way back again because it's dovetailed, and you can't just lift it straight up and pull it off the router table. What you need to do is you go all the way through and then come all the way back again to get the dovetail out of there without doing any damage to the inside of the board. So it's a little bit more difficult. So that's why I've stuck to the easier way of doing things. Okay, so the second one, we'll go back to our story stick. My story stick says from the end of there to the beginning of the cut is 141 millimeters. So from here to there, 141 millimeters. So same technique. Just bring that around so it's square. Just shift some stuff so I can work. Slide my fence out again. And I've got to go 141. Now I'm trying to stay square to the fence through the widest point of that router bit. Square to the fence. And there's my measurement. And that will give me my second cut. We've got 10 minutes, folks, so I'm going to try and get them all done by the end of the 10 minutes. Same process. Stay square to my fence. And it's just a matter of cutting through like so. Okay, so we're going to go that way. All right, ears on, everybody. Just thinking through that there, I noticed that when I cut my first one, I had my face side mark on my push block, and when I put this one down here, I've got it pointing away. So I've turned it upside down in the last cut. I don't know, not irredeemable, but I'll put these marks on here for a reason, and then I don't follow it through. Hopeless. And so now I have 2 of my sliding dovetails done. There's just a little bit of clean up on there. It's the nature of cedar, it does that. It's because it's furry and we're cutting across the grain. I'm not too concerned about keeping really sharp edges on the dovetails, on the rebates, I should say, because the piece of material that I use to make the shelf, which is going to be 10 millimeters, will have a shoulder on it, and the shoulder will cover the groove. Okay, so there we have 2 now, and you can see. If we measure that, this one here, it's a little over 50, okay, the next one's going to be 45, and then we're going to have 40, and then the last one will be 30. So now the next 2 cuts that we do on here have to be done from the other end. So therefore turning a piece of timber around, it's not going to hurt it. So back to our story stick. So what we've cut so far is we've cut this gap, we've cut that one, now we've got to cut these 2. So if we turn our story stick around, we've got 47 millimeters from the end here, and that 47 millimeters, the 35, allows for the thickness of our piece of material that's going to go in the top, plus a 0.5 millimeter overlap. So you've got to be thinking about that as well. And then the second one will be 97. So we might go back to the 97 first. And then we'll cut the last one a little short. Okay, so this one has to be 97, I think. Yes. It's 95, 97. Lock him in. Go back and check your measurements as you do this. Once you've cut it, you don't have any return because you're cutting halfway through your piece of material. Okay, so we cut this one first, this one second. It's got a little bit of a fold there. That's when we start the cut. What I'm going to do now is turn the board around so that it's this way, hard up against everything, and I'll do my next cut. Same with this one, it will turn around this way. So here's on. So it's just a matter of cleaning those up again. Okay, and the last one, back to our story stick. My last one is 47. And we just cut the last one, and that's our all 4 shelves. You always got to make sure that you know where you are at the whole time that you're cutting. So this is the bottom of the box. We're cutting the top of the box. So that's going to go on this side. Probably need to put those on properly. Okay, last one. Okay, so that's all we're going to get done today. So what I'm going to do next week is I'm going to cut the dovetails in the top and the bottom. Before next week comes, I will cut a couple of the other materials that I have there. I might cut the coachwood and the rose mahogany, and I'll cut those just to show you what sort of effect it has and what it looks like when they're cut. And we might end up combining a few of the different timbers in the boxes as we go. So we'll have a look at that as well. So at least if you're going to follow along with me and make this box, cut your material, and you should end up with 2 pieces like that, okay, with lovely dovetails in both. When you put the 2 pieces together, you will find that all your dovetails line up and your shelving will go in the correct place. The important thing to remember here is make sure we are perfectly square. Make sure you have quarter sawn timber. Those are two critical points that you need to sort of focus on to make sure that your box is going to get the right, going to look right at the end. Okay, so by all means, come along and work along with me, and I'm happy to just slow it down a little bit if you like, and yeah, we'll go from there. So so have a good week, everybody, and stay safe. And if you're new to this channel, like us, and yeah, chuck in a like or two, and then subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you every Sunday. We'll give you a little reminder to let you know what's going on. So by all means, stay safe everybody, and I will see you all next week.